typically the point of which a couple is coming in for support is usually about 7 years after they've initially started noticing the pattern, and likened it to going to a physician, a medical doctor, saying, I broke my arm 7 years ago.
I love this. That's how
Yeah,
it feels.
and can you help me? And it's like, yes, I can help you. And had we come in sooner, that what I might have been able to offer would have been that much more helpful or effective.
Welcome to this episode of the Sexual Empowerment for Women podcast. And today I'm super happy to introduce you to Dr. Jessica Higgins. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about our conversation.
It's just so cool to have someone being in New Zealand and have someone from America. It's so cool to connect. Yeah.
Exactly. Agreed.
And I just introduce you, and then we go into the questions. So Dr. Jessica Higgins has a PhD in clinical psychology and a MA in counseling psychology and 2 coaching certifications and decades of experience. And I looked at all the models you're using. It's like all of them. And so Jessica offers clients a comprehensive blend of psychology and coaching. And her work is attachment theory-based, trauma-informed, experiential, somatic, and integrative. And she's done her dissertation research on conscious intimate relationship, and I'm very curious about the definition of that. And she's a licensed psychologist and licensed professional counselor. And she's got an advanced training in emotionally focused therapy for couples. So welcome. I'm happy to have you here. Looked at your podcast, looked at your work, and I feel quite inspired by what you do.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the warm welcome. And I know we share a lot of similar interests. We were just chatting about our love for the outdoors and helping people get into that space in a way that they can access more of that experiential understanding of where they're at and how they show up in relationship. And then also the EFT training that we both done. So I love that we are good company there.
Yeah, and because I'm trained in Hakomi psychotherapy as well, which is very somatically based. Yeah,
Yes.
the adventure part is just it's amazing to bring it to people. Yeah, but I want to start with, because you talked about the conscious intimate relationship. There's now a lot of talk about kind of conscious, unconscious. How do you define it, and what can you say about that?
Well, that was many years ago, so I'll do my best to recollect. So, what I was really looking at as a modality for the way that the couple is functioning is a sense of staying awake, being aware, cultivating that presencing that oftentimes as humans, we like to automate, or just our nervous system tends to automate to conserve energy. And so when we're in a long-term relationship, oftentimes we can get a little habitual or routine. And while that's part of the comfort and the security, that really looking at the relationship from a growth orientation and seeing the opportunity for both individual and relational growth. In a nutshell, I would say a conscious relationship is one that we're leaning into the learning opportunities. So when something gets challenging or activating, that we're not necessarily seeing that as bad and wrong. We're looking at it as, okay, what's in this for me? What's in this for us? And how can we use this as an opportunity for growth?
That's so beautiful, because I totally believe our relationships are there for growth. And my relationship teachers, they said, oh, relationship road is hellish. And what they meant is actually because we assume it should be all roses and everything should be so beautiful. And then when things are a bit difficult, we go into, oh, if it doesn't work, maybe we don't love each other, maybe it's over. But that if we orient towards growth and lean into that, and what's in it for me, how can I grow and learn from that? Yeah.
Yes. And as you know, as a fellow practitioner, that oftentimes as we're moving through life, we might be attracted to certain things, or we might have certain tendencies that we're not even aware of. So when we explore, do the inner work, we start to learn, oh, I people please because I overfunctioned as a child, and that was the best way to feel stable. Or I shut down because no one really saw me and people weren't really responding. So it feels like a safer move to just go inward. And that these tendencies, as you know, from an attachment perspective, live in us, but we're not always aware that they're operating until we really turn towards them and look at them.
I work one-on-one with people and in couples. And in couple work, there's so much potential because we can really face those patterns. And it's like it's right in the face. And that's the beauty
Yes.
of it and the challenge.
Yes. And I don't know that I feel like for me, I'll just say, so my husband and I have been together, it'll be 20 years in this upcoming spring. Haven't been married the whole time, but together. And I am still profoundly surprised at the learning that is still happening that I feel like is still so much more to deepen in. So I feel like a journey.
I'm really believing in personal therapy because I feel like there's so much that I learn from my clients, learn for myself. And I guess for me, the point is not to process the pain, but actually then there's so much more aliveness and then there's so much joy. And that's what I love. And I work a lot with women where if we get into those kind of stuck places and we just expect relationships to be easy, then we shut down on a very deep level and it just feels so sad. Yeah.
Yes, and maybe not even know that that's what we're doing, right? That's the
Mm,
conscious, unconscious, is
mm,
that
mm.
when we're aware, that's kind of the meta cognition or the meta noticing. It's like I'm noticing myself as it's happening.
Mm,
And sometimes when I do the personal growth, I recognize, oh my gosh, I was holding myself in this very confined place. And to your point, that if I am willing to take some risks and explore beyond that, it's usually so much more liberating, so much more alive. And I would never want to go back, but that felt normal before.
it felt normal before. So I wonder just if we can say a couple of words, because sometimes people feel like I kind of should be able to do it by myself, right? And especially with couple work, is like if we go to couple therapy, some of my clients, they want to hide it from other people because as if it's something bad, like something wrong. And I know all that stuff, but I still get my own personal therapist. What can you say about that?
Yes, yes, yes. It's incredibly vulnerable to be observed and have the
Mm,
focus
mm,
and that witnessing. I know when I've done, and I go through in and out of doing my own therapy, and it can feel really scary to just reveal parts that maybe I wasn't, or explore parts that I wasn't really aware of, but to have somebody hold that space and part of you've probably familiar with your somatic background, but there's EMDR and a somatic approach to EMDR that really is looking at the sensations in the body that I'm sure is related to the nervous system and how we've experienced things that have either been painful or traumatic. And part of the EMDR or part of just having this space being held is to tolerate some of that discomfort, that I'm with you, metaphorically holding your hand, offering that support, that ground, that we can then begin to explore things that perhaps we didn't have the resource or the regulation to do, right? And when we look at some of the trauma models, like the window of tolerance, like we have enough capacity to turn towards some of these things that are painful. And sometimes it is too much for the system to confront alone, or that a witnessing person might ask certain questions that we've never thought about, right? There's people who know this intellectually, but it's still startling to think about that. Is it 90% of our thoughts are repetitive? Like we think the same thoughts every day. And I think 70% of those tend to be more negative. So to have someone else in the system, so to speak, to query or have wonder about things that we've never thought about, that's introducing something that's an activator for change. So I think there's so many things I could say about a helping professional that is able to hold that space.
yeah. And I love it, that kind of that tolerance. It increases our tolerance when someone else is there. And also for couples, what do you see? I guess the message I'd love to send to couples, because sometimes they come to me, well, it's not too late, but I wish, and they say, we wish we came to you 10 years before. But
Yes.
somehow there is a still stigma that if I go to therapy, it's almost like we're almost breaking up. That's the end of it. What can you
Yes.
say to that to encourage couples? Actually, they should, if you do it early, it's kind of easy, and then there's so much more enjoyment in life.
Yes. Well, I'm so appreciating just your commenting here on when people say, "Oh, I wish I would have come sooner." I do believe there's an analogy, and maybe it's the Gottman Institute, that said typically the point of which a couple's coming in for support is usually about 7 years after they've initially started noticing the pattern, and likened it to going to a physician, a medical doctor, saying, I broke my arm 7 years ago.
I love that. That's how it
Yeah,
feels sometimes.
and can you help me? And it's like, yes, I can help you. And had we come in sooner, that what I might have been able to offer would have been that much more helpful or effective. So, as far as the couple, another ream on seeking support is that there's a dance and there's a dynamic, typically a cycle, where a couple is in. And it's just you have two unique individuals, their patterns, their tendencies, and how in the couple system they relate to one another. I'll give an example just to help illustrate this. In classic, I know you're really very familiar. I'm sure
Go
your
for it.
listeners probably have heard too. But you have the one that's a little bit more of the pursuer, the one that's initiating contact and might even escalate that through criticism or complaint in the attempt to try to get their partner to engage. They mean well and they're trying to get a need met. Are you there? Will you respond to me? Do you care? Those type of things. But typically, how it might land with their partner is somehow they're doing something wrong, they're failing, I am problematic, or I'm not enough. And so they then start to shut down. And their tendency is this is the better move to not say or do anything that's going to be hurtful, or I'm doubting myself. They're giving me all this negative feedback. So therefore, I don't want to hurt that person anymore. I don't want to hurt my partner anymore. So I'm just not going to say anything. And so that quieting or that going inward tendency to the other person can look like non-responsiveness or distancing or turning away or not caring and not wanting to resolve it. So this can be a dance that is creating a lot of disconnection. So if that's happening, there's a whole opportunity to create a different pattern together, to learn new moves, to learn new ways of relating to each other where you can connect and access deeper levels of vulnerability and be able to really address things in a more, I would say, like the essence of what's getting triggered, that can be addressed. And people typically need support with that. We know what we know, we do what we've done. And it usually, when we look at those tendencies for good reason, we learn that and it worked well. So it's really learning a new language so that you can really feel more connected.
I love that, a new language, because to learn a new language, yeah, we
Yes.
need someone to teach us a new language. Like how else would you learn?
Yes, yes. We grew up in a certain environment and through repetition, typically, I'm in the US but typically young ones are there from infancy to like 18 before they go to university or college. And so that's a lot of months,
Repetition.
days, moments, right, where we're having relational learning.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. I love that broken leg metaphor, and I'd love to send this message to couples that come earlier. Then it's way easier on a couple, way easier on us, and we can be so much more effective in the work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And that, I would imagine you would agree that in my work, I sometimes forget to count how many years I've been helping people, but I have yet to come across someone that I'm like, something's just not right with you. When I learn and understand them, I feel like, oh, okay, I get it. Perhaps
Exactly.
their tendencies or their behaviors are not supporting them. It makes sense why they do what they do.
Yeah.
And I think with that compassion, that people can borrow that a little bit and therefore access some of the things that maybe they feel shame about or feel broken
Mm.
about, or maybe don't even know, right? The unconscious things, that the shadow of what's there that they might have fear around.
Which is again a big thing that you talk about, and then I want to go to the next question. But this piece is so important that as therapists, right, we can have that compassion for that person, for a partner, but actually their partner might not be able to, and that's where we step in and really help. Because until we feel that compassion, we can't actually open up. So
Yes.
that's where, yeah, I feel like our work is so important
I
because
don't
we
know
can.
if you've experienced
Oh,
this just even in the initial assessment, asking those kind of deeper questions about who they turn to for
mm,
comfort growing up or the relational learning. I've had partners say, I know all of this, but I've never thought about it in this
mm,
context. It's so helpful for them to just be in the listening space and just observe and learn. It can be
mm.
really powerful.
Yeah, yeah, and it touches something deeper inside. So I've got this question that I really want to ask you, yeah, about the role of sex in relationships, because Most of the women that are listening, they're kind of women after 40, and sometimes where they go with that is that it's been a burden or I don't need it as much. And we kind of put it very last on our priority list, especially when women start to go through menopause. So, what is your view? The role of sex in relationships?
Well, there's a few prongs, I would say, to how to approach this. And I think every body is different, and that there are many factors that play a part in one's desire or arousal. And stress is a huge one. As you
Mm,
said, if we're not prioritizing it or making room and space, it can be difficult to just turn on the interest like a light switch. It's a way of filling the cup, if you will, that we actually have been attending to our bodies. So, stereotypically, a lot of women will be in the role of caregiving or doing for others. And so, there's can be a sense of depletion. And I think when we talk about perimenopause or menopause, I think particularly, I'm not a physician medically, but I understand that if someone is going into that phase and they're experiencing a lot of stress, sometimes that process can be that much more symptomatic because their system is depleted and their neurochemicals and their hormones and all the things are not as well balanced. And so I think there is some of the nurturing of the body and being able to have places where one can slow down and feel their body.
mm,
So, depending on one's role, if professional and they're performing or doing the things that they do during the day that help them be the expert in the way that they are, they may not be accessing or utilizing their body. I mean, some people use their body in their career, but most of us in the
yeah, we
Western
do.
world are a little more disembodied, myself included. I'm like, we're on a camera and I'm like, in front of my computer and I'm not really moving my body. I'm just talking with you or I'm sitting all day talking with clients. So I personally do yoga. I love to get on a hiking trail. I find it most useful if I'm interested in sharing sexual intimacy with my husband to give myself time to rest and just be. And I
Mm,
find that even for us together, even if the intention is to connect more in the sexual space, I'm much more able to transition into that space if I have time to just be. So when we don't have a TV on, there's no devices, we're not trying to accomplish a task together, we're not eating, we're not doing anything. We're just being that I
mm,
can start to feel my body cues. I can start to listen to what feels true for me, what feels good for me. I can start to connect with my breath more. And then I just feel more interested in him versus like, okay, we've got a sex date and I'm gonna like transition and then I'm like, come to that space. And then I'm like, I don't even know where I'm at or like where my
what's
body's
going
at. And
on?
it's a big ask for me to transition
Mm,
without having that internal connection. So that's one aspect that's more of an individual piece. But I do think the breathing and the connecting to the body is so essential to any type of sexual
Well, and
connection.
it's kind of in a way what you talk about, right? Because quite often what women say is like, oh, he doesn't turn me on anymore. But actually, that I take what you talk about, right? I take responsibility. I need to put myself in a state where there is actually space for me to even turn towards myself, to start to feel those feelings. Because if I'm always talking here and like doing and doing and doing, it's very hard for our partners to come into the space and somehow turn us on.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that there's something really powerful to noticing even just things that feel exciting or that bring interest. It might not even be arousal, but maybe arousal, like throughout the day of like, ooh, I felt a little something, right? And it doesn't need to mean anything that I'm going to act on it, but it's just like, oh, hello. And when some traditions, the sexual energy is very connected to vitality. So it's like where we feel passion, where we feel excited. And if we're not in a phase or a season where that's really prominent, it's just like listening and like, ooh, was there any part that feels aroused? And that from there, perhaps we might have more desire. Because if we're not feeling any arousal, nothing is awake. How do we have desire? Because there's not a lot to kind of move from.
And it's almost like, as you talk about, and that's what I often say, it's not just about sex, and it's totally like that, it's our life force, but it's about our passion for life. It's like that engagement with life. Even now, I'm just looking at you. There's so much delight in you, and there's so much
Mhm.
engagement, and it just feels so beautiful. But that's when women go into, I'm so overwhelmed, and I'm just doing machine. My to-do list takes over, and we don't have that aliveness inside. It kind of
Mhm.
becomes really difficult, huh? Then we blame our partners.
Yes, yes. And I was going to say, don't get me wrong, there's times definitely where at the end of the day, I'm cashed and I don't have a lot of energy and I do need to rest. And if there's the intention to be intimate, I feel like I would do my best to do some self-care in preparation, whether or not it's earlier in the day or earlier if we plan a couple days out, like get some of that connecting time. Like for me, just even moving my hips or even a song that I can dance to just to feel a little bit of like my body, like, oh, it's
Ah.
night and day different. And that's just for me. It's just what feels good for me. And some people might want to have a different practice, take a hot bath or have a breathing meditation exercise and really breathing deeply into the lower abdomen. And we just start to feel some awakeness.
Dance is good. Actually, I looked at the research where dance is actually the best form of exercise because
Ooh,
it gives us the joy, it opens our body, and when there's a movement. So I think everyone
yes.
needs to dance more. Like imagine like all the women before having sex, we have like, two songs and we dance.
I know. Or stretch even, just like it
Yeah,
doesn't have to
oh
be
yeah,
like
yeah, I can feel
technical.
it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And so I wonder, right, as you know that sometimes it's not easy for women to step into that place, but how important it is actually to even for the mindset, like how do you see how important it is for intimate relationships to actually have sex as part of it rather than just being the partners, the teamwork and
Yes.
functioning together? Like what is the role you see sex plays in that intimate connection?
Well, I would say that it can easily be defined by the partners and what is meaningful for them. But typically, I see in my work, and I'm sure you see elements of this as well, that it is a form of connection, that there's that skin to skin contact that they say, even in our nervous system, we're feeling something incredibly powerful in that skin to skin contact, that we are sharing in that sexual space that if they're in a monogamous relationship, they're not doing with anyone else. So it's a
Mm.
very private thing. And, there can have to be so many benefits. And this is where, again, I would defer to what it means to each individual. But typically it means, oh, like we just feel more resilient, like we're nurturing our connection. We feel stronger, we feel closer. All the physiological benefits that come from being sexual. I mean, it's the list is long, right, of how we
Or can
benefit
you tell
from.
couple of physiological benefits? Because I think women forget about it. They don't even think about it. They're like, no, I don't have sex, I don't have touch, it's fine.
Well, I would ask the question, what does sex allow you to feel? And if you're saying they're disconnected with that and they're saying it doesn't have any value for me, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would just get curious about that. Is it how it ranks with other things? Are there resentments that exist that interfere? What's blocking that the benefits of that? That perhaps there's certain things that have gotten in the way. I've had clients tell me like, "Oh, my partner's just that not that skillful, and perhaps I don't feel pleasure or I don't orgasm. Like, what's the benefit if I'm not really getting that much pleasure or I'm not happy and I'm not feeling good in our relational dynamics? So why would I want to open up this very intimate space in me? Or I'm depleted and I don't have my needs met, the self-care piece. So I would look at less of trying to convince someone into the benefits of the couple of being sexually intimate, but more of like what's getting in the way. I mean, if somebody's saying they're asexual and they've never been interested in sex, then that's something that is
That's really.
absolutely
Mm.
fair. How a couple negotiates, do they want a sexless relationship, or how does one person feel that they're getting their sexual needs met if the other person's saying I don't want to be sexual? But I find more often than not that people do want to be sexual. It's just there's a lot that's running interference. And then the hormones is a thing, right? Hormones are huge in affecting our libido. And so depending on someone's philosophy, they may want to get support around that, whether or not it's supplements or dietary, or some people do hormone replacement therapy. Like there's different ways to support the balancing of the hormones. But I don't know if I'm answering your question. I think that I'll just say one last thing as far as the couple dynamic. I believe that in the sexual space, that it's a mirror or it reflects what's happening in the relationship in general. So if partners are having a hard time saying this is what feels good, or perhaps we come to the sexual space and we just do the same thing every time. Like we just know that that kind of works and we just do that. So it's like a script.
Mm.
Likely there's other areas in their life where they're in routine or they're afraid to bring up their needs because it requires a bit of autonomy. I mean, there's competing needs here. There's the autonomy and then there's the intimacy. So it's the willingness to be close, but it's also looking at how do I want to give to you in a way that gives me pleasure? How do I want to be touched in a way that gives me pleasure? And then where am I able to give and how do I want to serve you or show up for your needs? So it's both. I see more people have a hard time with acknowledging what feels good and what they want and really making that visible in a way that can be heard. It's not criticism or turning away or shutting down. It's like helping the partner see that.
Yeah, which kind of that's an important piece, right? That's where kind of the emotional and sexual cycles come together. And that's what quite often happens for women. We put that responsibility on the partner and he doesn't
Yes.
know, he doesn't kind of, turn me on or he doesn't know what to do. But actually what I hear you say, right, and that's an important piece, actually coming back to yourself. And are you able to actually voice it? Do you know what you want, what you need? And that's where, again, the EFT cycle comes in. Yeah, if I'm not able to voice it and I'm not able to share it, or if I share it with criticism, then it actually becomes really difficult for the partner to hear. And then, of course, it's
Yes.
defensive.
Yes, yes. And to your point, some women, if they have had difficulty orgasming, and again, there's a lot of things that can interfere with this being accessible, but knowing one's body, this would really be for women that have never done this, but it's like perhaps masturbating and getting a sense of like where you feel, and this can change over a season of life, right? Like maybe when I was younger, this is how I could achieve an orgasm or climax and maybe it's changing. But to have, again, that contact with what feels good and where am I experiencing pleasure? And then it's being able to guide or show your partner is what's feeling really good to me right now, or would you be willing, or I want to experiment with this, and like guiding in a direction that feels positive that could be helpful.
Yeah, but there's a place where I actually need to find it for myself. Yeah. And I wonder, like, I've got this question. If we, in FT, right, there is this assumption that if we have this emotional connection, then sex is going to flow easily, right? That's one side of it. And then Estepirella, she kind of goes into that's a very different, that we need that variety, we need this autonomy to start to feel that attraction. That attraction exists in the space between. So I wonder
Yes.
what you've been trained in EFT and all that. What is that relationship between emotion, sexuality?
Well, okay, so I know about Esther Perel's work. I haven't done deep study with kind of her philosophy, but I understand it and I agree with it. I do remember, I don't know if you've come across Dick Schwartz, and
Yeah,
he wrote Passionate Marriage and Resurrecting Sex,
yeah,
Intimacy and Desire, and he was very much about being differentiated, being in an individual space about holding on to yourself, being able to tolerate when your partner is upset with you and how to self-validate, these type of things. And when I came into the EFT work, I was like, well, how does this fit? And I
yeah.
remember asking questions about it and they're like, we're just kind of different camps. Like we don't really speak that language. And as I listened to the model, I will say I found a space that I felt they're working in
Tell me.
concert.
Okay, tell me.
Well, okay. So in the EFT work, if I'm working with a couple and one person's got an issue or is protesting about something, unpacking that, trying to access the deeper core need or the emotion, like their attachment longing. Typically, then we invite them to turn to their partner. We call it an enactment, right? Turn to their partner and say the more vulnerable version of that. So it's a clearer signal. And that to me is holding on to oneself, is
Mm.
standing in one's own space and is owning a part of it, even if the whole part is too hard, that they're in a place of being embodied with it. It's like, can you feel it in your body? Can you show that face or that emotion to your partner? And that is an embodied experience, in my opinion. And so to be able to, and usually that's where, again, a therapeutic support is able to help that person occupy that space a little bit, feel a little safer, take a little bit more of an emotional risk and show that to their partner. To me, that is the differentiating work than turning over and then sending it over. Because in my understanding, the partner, when they can hear the clear need without the criticism, then they're much more apt to be compassionate or feel affected. Like, oh, I heard that this is so painful for you, or I feel sad that this is so painful for you, and I want to help, right? That's when there's not a lot of other blocks that are getting in the way. But the person genuinely is feeling a little bit more inclined to like want to help, or at least part of them can sense that. So it's not that I'm farming out like the person that raised the issue. It's not that I'm like now making it your responsibility to care for that need. But yes, in partnership, we want our partner to care and want to help, but they're not, we can't make them ultimately responsible. We're responsible. So I think that work continues to, as we were talking about it, it's a practice. So when we put that in the sexual space, to be able to connect with what is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I'm experiencing? Showing that clearly and vulnerably, I think is holding on to
A lot of
oneself.
courage, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's I'm attracted to someone else and I don't know what that means, or I'm wanting to, I've had a lot of curiosity about something we've never tried before, and I'm scared that it's too outside of your comfort zone, but I notice I really am interested in what that would be like, or I want to slow things down and just breathe more with you. And would you have the patience for that? Like that is an expression that's a risk. And I think that is part of that holding on and the individual part. Tell me what you think.
Oh, it's beautiful. Like when you talk about it, and what I feel is that quite often what I found in EFT is that we can focus more on those emotional vulnerabilities. But the piece you're talking about, and I'm loving it, and that's what part of my work is. If we go to those risky places, more like desires rather than actually, oh, this is my emotional vulnerability, but also opening up around those desires and what do we want to experience together. And I feel like that's where that sexuality piece can come in, and that's what can become exciting. Because if it's only about my vulnerability and you're there for me and you're there for my inner child, yeah, it doesn't have the juice there, it doesn't have the zing. So
Yes.
how can we, so I don't believe it's just about the emotional connection, but what you talk about now, it's a bit different, right? It's not just about emotional connection, but how can I really put more of myself into this relationship, even though it's risky, and put all of me here. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think this is difficult if we rely solely on our partner to know ourselves sexually. I think we can say, can we have some space to just slow down and just be curious, like where we can explore our respective interests or what might be new and have some space for that. I have a recommendation for that. But I think oftentimes there's a sense of like time is so valuable. And you talk about all the lists and the priorities that we approach the sexual space, and it's like, okay, let's do this thing. And there's an expectation that we're both aroused, we're both ready, we're just gonna have our, sexual experience together, feel satisfied, feel both mutually fulfilled. And then,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Like,
It's just like,
oh.
yeah, that's hard to say that's going to happen. And so I do think some of the individual exploration can be helpful so that you're a little bit more prepared. But the thing I was going to mention, may I give a plug to someone else? It's called The Wheel of Consent. I interviewed her. You know her, Betty Martin.
I love him very much. Yeah.
So if you've mentioned her work, I'm sure you could put links to her work. But
Yeah.
one of her exercises is really simply, I think, which is the wheel of consent. And there's different ways to do this, but is having there's 4 layers. And the way I understand it is you're really trying to give specificity or give real attention to the giving and the receiving. So each partner is looking at, because sometimes we don't know why we're doing what we're doing. We're like touching someone or touching our partner in this way because we think they like it, but is it because they like it, or is it because I like it? Or, there's a lot of things that we're not even quite sure why we're doing what we're doing. And so to really embody that more fully and taking ownership of, and she'll put a clock on it, right? And usually in the beginning, it's non-sexual, just to help people feel feel a little bit more comfortable. So round one would be, if I'm talking about me and my husband, it would be like, I'm going to, for 3 minutes, touch you in a way that gives me pleasure. So it's really vulnerable in the sense of everything I'm doing is because I like it.
And
If
that's
we're purely doing it. And then the second round would be he's touching or giving to me in a way that he wants to, that gives him pleasure. He's giving to me. And then the third and fourth is I'm receiving, I'm asking for what I want in a way that I'm wanting or gives me pleasure. So I'm receiving in a way that gives me pleasure. And then he would do the same. So we're really getting clear on the giving and the receiving and how it's pleasurable. So that can be difficult if one is usually in the I want to please you mode.
well, it's quite a lot of conflict, and I kind of know that we're gonna just so beautiful when we really become clear because if I'm expecting him to give me pleasure without me saying what I want, and he's trying to figure out, and he thinks he's giving me pleasure, but actually it's not so pleasurable, and I'm not even saying it. It's like, who is this for?
I don't want to hurt you, but I'm trying to please you.
And
Yeah.
it becomes so difficult. So it's beautiful now. Put it in show notes that people can actually look at that work and it become really clear. Who is this for? Can ask for what I want and can actually take pleasure from the
Yes.
partner, which can create so
Yes.
much more clarity and more pleasure.
And speaking of conscious or unconscious, we might learn some things that we did not know. I remember the first time my husband and I did this. I wanted him to touch me in an energetic way, like almost if people are familiar with like therapeutic touch. So if you imagine like my skin a couple inches above that, and it's more of like sending love or intention without actually touching me. And I started to cry. It felt so nurturing and it felt so honoring that, like, sometimes I don't know if you've ever come across the erotic blueprints
Totally.
that I think he's a little bit more sensual. So he likes the contact. He likes the holding and the caressing. And I do too. I just think I need a little bit more anticipation and space before going there. And it was so important for me to just have an experience around. And I had no idea. I just was like, I don't know what I'm going to say, but I'll just think of what feels true in the moment. And it was like, oh, I want you to do that to me. And it like had such meaning and such significance. So I think we might learn a lot that we maybe wouldn't otherwise paying attention to.
Beautiful. I feel like we can talk and talk. There's like, oh, more, but we but it was like, oh.
Yes,
But I know I'm coming on
yes,
your podcast in a couple of weeks.
yes. Yay. I love
Incredible.
that.
But I just really love that. And you're so delightful. I'm just really enjoying being here in your presence. It's like, oh,
Oh,
it feels so good.
same, same.
I
Yes.
wonder, Jessica, if you feel into like, what would be your last kind of, if you feel into the women, yeah, who feel a bit stuck, a bit disconnected, yeah, what
Hmm.
would you tell them? What is the way
Hmm.
back into that connection? What's the first step? Or like whatever the message you feel like for them.
Hmm. I want to just offer the invitation to breathe more deeply and notice some form of pleasure, whether or not it's looking at a tree or the cloud in the sky or feeling your feet make contact with the ground, whether or not it's flooring or carpeting or whatever, and just having a little bit more awareness of the body and doing one's best to like breathe and just be with it for a little bit, even if it's just a minute, or if it's drinking a hot beverage, the sensation of seeing the steam rise or yeah,
For me,
I know, same. Yeah. And just the different qualities, right? That's more of the mindfulness, but like what it looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like, and just the sensation of the warm beverage in the body and just seeing if there's an ability to be with that and just notice. That would be where I would start.
Beautiful. And if you can tell, how can people find more about you? Do you work online with couples? Yeah.
I do,
Tell
I
us more
do.
about your work. Yeah.
Yeah. My website is drjessicahiggins.com. That's doctor with a DR. And there people can find out more about my programs, the coaching work, the podcast, and I write articles occasionally. I'm more focused on the podcast, but I'm on social media and all the things. That's the best place to access what I'm up to.
And so do you work with like couples one-on-one? Do you do group work? What do we do?
Yes, I do the one-on-one, and then the group work. We were just talking. I have a couples adventure retreat that's therapeutic in nature. It's not for people that are in crisis, but it's for people who really want to be more in this embodied place of reconnecting, having beautiful nature. We're going to be in Banff, Canada in 2026 in September. And I'm only working with 6 couples, so it's a very intimate
Special. Mm.
setting, but I'm curating it so that we'll have lots of exercises and things for people to really cultivate that presencing and that bonding together in a way that just is private for the couple.
Mhm.
So,
Beautiful.
uh,
So much.
yes, thank
Was
you for
that good?
having me. I
Yeah.
appreciate your listening and just I can tell how much this means to you and your passion to help people and
I do. It's like,
thank
oh,
you.
it feels like
Yeah.
there's this. It's a beautiful dance I feel here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And listeners, thank you so much for being here with us. I'll put everything in the show notes. Feel free to reach out to Jessica, and we'll see you next week. Bye.